Thank you so much. I want to clarify straight away for the benefit of the audience that the title of this event does not really do justice to its content, and also to alert you to the fact that one of the books does contain sexual violence and the rape of a child. So we will be talking about that, and I wanted to make sure that that was something that the audience was aware of. But I have to tell you that these two books are quite extraordinary works of fiction. It's my great honor to be in conversation with you both. And before we begin, I would like to ask you, one of the books, Sad Tiger, is a very ambitious memoir of sexual violence, of the abuse that you endured as a child. Sleepless is a graceful, sparkling, intellectual treasure chest of critical writing around the idea of sleeplessness. So very different in content, and I wanted to be very clear on that. What you share is that they're both works of extraordinary intimacy, and that has its own challenges. You're both very present in your non-fiction, and I'd like to ask you both to respond to that or reflect on that to begin with.
Yes, thank you for that question. It's true. In my opinion, in my book, and I think there's something I have in common with the non-fiction written by Marie, the question is not the intimacy because you talk about an intimate thing or fact, but the relationship with the reader, like an intimate relationship with the reader. Like I tell my own story in the first person as if I was alone with that reader, and I want the reader to have this feeling too, like she is alone in a safe place with that voice talking to her, not exactly as a confession, more like an intimate conversation with friend, like not only sharing intimate facts, but giving us some space to think as if no one was judging you, to dwell deep in a subject as if we could do this in a safe place. And I think that's the conditions of intimacy that literature mostly provides anyway. But it's different when the topic is taboo. So that's, I think, the specific point in my book.
Sleepless is a book that has been mostly written at night, alas for me. And when I wrote it at 4 a.m., I was thinking of the insomniacs among us, and I was hoping that other insomniacs, other sleepless people, would relate to my experience and to the vertigo, to the loopings, that I can feel at night when I am not sleeping. And the book is really born from that darkness and that spiraling thinking, relentless thinking in the middle of the night when one does not sleep. And fortunately for me, I found other writers and other people that are also sleepless, and the book is full of references to these other sleepless people.
Thank you. So Neige, to return to you, we open this book, and as you mentioned, it's an intimate reading. For the reader, you are immediately pulled inside. You're immediately inside. And in the second paragraph, we are in hell. And not only we are in hell, but we are in hell as a 7-year-old child. And you actually say later in the book, you turn your back on fiction and you ask yourself, what is appropriate as a way to tell this story? So can you tell us now how you've gone about telling the story of the abuse?
It's exactly this. It's like there's no appropriate way. There's no good way to tell that story. And there has never been. And there's no good way in France, and there's no good way in India. So I'm just going to start the way I want to. It gives me a lot of freedom, paradoxically, that I'm going to have to break a taboo anywhere I try to do this from. So it's true, I made the decision to start right away. Like I don't build up some expectation from my reader. There's no surprise in the book. This is going to be a book about sexual abuse on children and something I went through myself as a child, which mostly in the books about trauma, this happens, but it happens after 100 pages of building up trust with the reader. And I made the decision, for many reasons, for that book to start as if it was in the middle of a reflection. And the book starts with a sentence which is cut in the middle. It says, the first sentence is, because for me too, what's most interesting is what's going on in the perpetrator's head. So it starts with because, as if you step up in someone's conscience, as if this reflection has been going on for a long, long time, and you're briefly invited into that brain to see that reflection.
And yet you chose not to use fiction as a medium to be inside the perpetrator's head.
Exactly. I don't use fiction, but I have I use storytelling. So it's a very strange. It's strange for me too, because I'm not used to non-fiction writing. But I try to mix storytelling. I have to tell that story, and at the same time, I want to analyze that story as an example of one out of 1,000 other stories that tell the same story of a child being molested by an adult. So there's, I go back and forth between trying to tell the story and trying to think very deeply about the consequences of that story in someone's life.
You say there's no surprises. I was constantly surprised, not least because it's very funny, which shocked me deeply. And I wondered about the politics of me laughing at parts of the story. And it called to mind the Margaret Atwood quote, women fear that men will kill them, men fear that women will laugh at them.
Yes.
How on earth was it possible to generate humor?
Thank you. It's true, I didn't want to surprise the reader with the fact that it's a book about childhood abuse in childhood. So it's mentioned on the first page. But everything else, I wanted to be a surprise because I'm building a different kind of expectation. The expectation is not when is the rape going to happen, or what exactly happened to her, because we know this from the beginning. The surprise is, what is she going to invent in the next chapter to make me still interested? And that's why also I have this, sometimes I try to instill some sense of humor, which is also, I think, a political statement. Like victims of rape, we are normal people, and we are serious people, and dealing with a very serious issue. But I'm also someone who can be, who can see the comical sides, the absurdness of some of the situations. And I try to instill sometimes a little bit of lightness in the storytelling. I try to be ironic at moments when I think it's possible, and sometimes I think it goes too far, so I apologize to the reader. And I try to build a relationship with the reader which is not only based on this horrible story I'm trying to tell. It's also based on the interesting experience of you reading that story.
You're so successful in creating that intimacy that I feel like I love you. I feel like, I don't know if this happens to you a lot, but...
I love her too.
Yes, I mean, if you
not
read
exactly
this book,
me, you know, it's a construction, it's the narrative voice.
I don't normally say that because it's such an embarrassing thing to say, and I'm British. But when you read this book, it's a deeply, it's so horrific, and yet your response is so connecting. And then, of course, one of the other things you do is weave around literatures around rape. So, of course, Nabokov, but also Toni Morrison. And there's much ground to be covered there, and much fruitfulness there. Can you talk about how you worked with other writers?
Yes, I think, you know, the reason why it happens to you, like you feel this connection with the narrative voice. It happens to me too when I read non-fiction that I really like, is that non-fiction that's well written makes me feel intelligent, makes me participate in this process of, even if it's something I have not personally been through. Like I'm not an insomniac, but when I read the book by Marie, I feel that I can get a grasp of this experience. I feel that me too, I can share some life that is never going to be mine, which is something we also do in fiction, but it's different in the non-fiction because you know the author, this narrative voice that speaks is the real person, that it's confusing, and I think that's why you feel connected to that entity, to that voice that is in this intimacy with you.
There are so many parts that I could ask questions about, but I particularly enjoyed a section where you look at the sentence, "I was raped," which, you know, is it's a shockingly common experience. And to hear it verbalized in that, we recognize that it's framed in a passive way. The protagonist the perpetrator is not present in that sentence. Can you talk about the passive framing of the language that we use around rape?
Yes, I've tried to examine many different things, many different ways we have and we don't have to talk about rape. There's no good word, there's no good way. And one very shocking thing is this passive way of talking about rape that puts the victim in the center. I was raped, like it's almost in the grammar a way to blame the victim, which reflects what society usually does. She got raped. She was raped. It's something that happened to her. And the sentence itself, the way language is telling the story, it already has a judgment on the victim. So I try to highlight those things which are very violent in a way. It's violent to see that language is not faithful. Language, we can't trust language to carry out our experience. And maybe we can relate with the question of memory like this. Like there's no good way to use words to give life to an experience you've been through. And so, you know, it's just the way it is. It's not sad, it's just something I want to be conscious of. I want to be critical all the time, and I want my reader to know that we're not going to be able to get a perfect knowledge of what I'm trying to do.
And I'm interested in the failure of language to adequately represent rape. And I mean, tributes to you both, you're not speaking in your first language, and I'm just curious as to whether this is, you know, outside of the English language, whether you know that this is a more global phenomenon, that it tends to be a thing that happens to a woman rather than something that a man does.
I also speak Spanish, so it's very strange because the feeling of being frustrated not to be able to carry away what I really want to say happens in my mother tongue and in my acquired tongue the same way. So I think as a writer, I always translate from something that's not verbal, something that's an ideal story that's never going to happen, and I make the best translation I can. And it's, so of course, it's a failure, but it's also a miracle that it can happen, that words can say something.
And they have to, they must. And so this is what we see, the consistent attempts to attack this failure of language is what makes the book so exciting. The book is hugely successful. It has been a wild success. My question, and I want more people to buy it, so please do come to the signing afterwards. My question is, are the people you want to read it reading it?
I think, yes. I've been very surprised of how this book has circulated from friend to friend. You know, lots of people think, oh, I don't want to read that kind of story, it's too sad or it's too painful. And then someone tells them, you should read this. And then we talk about this. So it's been wonderful for a writer to have once in their life a book which was written in loneliness, not knowing what would happen, to suddenly be interesting to so many different kinds of people.
Can we just have a round of applause, please? Because this book is an extraordinary achievement. Thank you. Marie, so you divide the world into people who can sleep and people who can't sleep. I feel like saying sorry because I can sleep. I feel kind of bad about that. But as you mentioned earlier, the experience of reading this book is very intoxicating. And as we just discussed, I'm very much pulled inside by your writing style. And you mentioned the looping, the kind of dizziness. I was quite disoriented. And you use not just words, but also images. You draw us so much inside this experience of yours. Can you talk about that writing technique?
Well, Neige and I share some things. We are writing in French. We share the same publisher in France. His name is POL, and it means a lot. It means that POL is a publisher that gives attention to words. And what we share, and what I share with other poets and writers at POL, is this attention to words, with the knowledge that words can't say everything, but I will try very hard. And we managed to reach something. And the other thing that those very different books share is the appeal to you readers in very different ways, but in the hope of that you are here with us and that we can be here with you. And it's a miracle to be read and to be in part understood while you write alone. And I'm sure there are writers here too. And this amazing shock between really writing alone in your mind, in your body, and discovering that you can be understood and read. It's still something. I'm 57. My first novel was published in '96. And it's still something, when I wake up in the morning, I still feel how privileged and lucky I am. Thank you to all the readers, really. Sleepless or not.
You don't imagine a reader or your readers when you're writing?
No, we often attend, and I love traveling and seeing readers from all different countries. So I know you exist. But you are still a bit abstract when I write, and also a bit scary, because I also wrote more fiction, but also dealing with violence and sexual violence in fiction. And I was scared. My first novel, Pigtails, Truisme, is about, let's say, prostitution, sexual domination, male domination. But it was written in a sort of backlash of feminism in the 90s in France. After my mother's generation in the 70s in France, she got us contraception and abortion right, reproduction rights, which was so important. But my generation, I was raised in the 70s, we were living a sort of backlash. And I as a young girl, was constantly harassed in the streets. And I didn't understand why, because I was a young human being thinking in my mind, and I write when I walk. I walk and I write all the time in Bordeaux and then in Paris, where I studied. And men, all sorts of men and boys, dared interrupt me. And sometimes politely, you know. Eh, bonjour, mademoiselle. Yeah, but they interrupted me. And sometimes, because of them, I lost ideas, which is unbearable, because I am a human being who thinks. And all of a sudden, each time I was going out from my little apartment, I was seen as a piece of meat, as a piece of sexual meat. And that was a very big shock for me. And my first novel is born out of that rage. So I trust you, readers, but I also defy you. And read me if you can. You see what I mean? It's also a sort of duel. How do you say duel?
A duel.
A duel, yeah.
I challenge you.
Yes. So, well, Sleepless is another sort of book. Now you know what? I'm like an old yogurt. I'm 57, so nobody stops me in the streets anymore. So I can think and walk and think. But my books, Sleepless is a book that is also born of a sort of turmoil, because it's very exhausting not to sleep. And I trust you to find your way in my labyrinth, in my dédale, in my... the book has 7 parts, and until the very end, until the publishing moment, the parts kept moving. Especially there is a part about the animals, the other animals. I like to say the other animals because we are animals, and we are surrounded by other animals, and some people eat them, which I find really embarrassing, because I don't eat other animals. But animals know how to sleep. When human beings, we are losing our sleep. And because of many things that I deal with the book. But the part of the animals was so important to me that it kept floating among the other parts of the book. The other animals were everywhere. That's when we need a publisher. I don't know about you, but did they help you put your book in parts, or was it right away like it is now?
It was like this.
C'était comme ça?
Yeah, it was like this. It
Okay.
was, but it's true. It's also something we share. Like, we're not afraid of writing structurally challenging books. Like Mary's book, it's obvious because it's a book about insomnia. So you expect as a reader to go through many digressions and go somewhere a little bit unknown. But still, it's a very challenging structure. You have to surrender in a way as a reader. Like, we have to let her drive us through her thinking. And the reflection about animals is completely unexpected. But then it's like something, I can imagine what it means to be an insomniac and have a thought creeping into your mind and imposing itself, even if it's not obvious.
When you're really exhausted with sleeplessness, parts of you do become animal. I mean, there are no words anymore. When you're really exhausted, when you don't sleep, the words are gone, and you're full of sensations and images. And sometimes I wonder if other animals do not think that way. Obviously, they have no words, but they have their own language, many of them. And I wonder, sometimes you're so exhausted that you're hallucinating, you know? And you can connect with other living beings when you're in this sort of trance of exhaustion. It's not nice, but maybe there are some corridors that open in places that you've never been before. And that's also literature. My favorite writers are, of course, insomniacs. Kafka, Proust, Marguerite
Did you know
Duras.
that before they were your favorite writers, or that you fell in love with them?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Before I wrote the book, I didn't know. I became aware of that when I wrote the book, yeah. And the book deals a lot with other insomniac writers.
I love your analogy of a labyrinth, because it has this, like we've mentioned, it has this sort of giddying, sparkling, glinting in different directions effect. To return to an earlier theme of the exploration of the intimate, you describe sleeping, you compare it to defecating, in the sense that it's a private thing, everyone does it, and yet subjecting it to scrutiny is a difficult thing to do. And you talk about the private space, and I love the section in which you talk about the private space of the bedroom, and you talk about sleeping solo. I've lost the quote. You connect this to Virginia Woolf's Room of One's Own. Can you tell us about that chamber, the maid in the chamber episode?
An interesting point maybe is that I'm also a translator, and I'm very happy to be one of Virginia Woolf's translators in France. And I've retranslated A Room of One's Own, this masterpiece, this pioneering book of a early feminism. And strangely, oddly enough, in France, the book has always been translated by une chambre à soi, which literally means a bedroom of one's own, a bedroom, as if a woman could only belong to a bedroom. No, Virginia Woolf knows what she's writing. She's writing about rooms, about sitting rooms, about bedrooms, and about bed-sitting rooms in her essay. I'm the translator. I know the book almost by heart. And so the title is not a bedroom of one's own, it's a room, c'est-à-dire un lieu à soi, a place of one's own. So it's very important. As a translator and a writer, of course, my attention goes to words very specifically, very attentively. And I was aware that, for example, when you're an insomniac person, those among you who sleep poorly, perhaps you have referred to a doctor, a specialist of insomnia. There are many in Europe and in France. And all of them told me, you must not work in the same room where you sleep. That was obvious. So I separated the room with the bed, the bedroom, and the room with the desk, the room where I write. And, but it made things even worse, because when I don't sleep, I write. I still write in my mind. So I had to get up and go to the room where my computer was. And so I kept walking in the apartment all the time. And my husband is also an insomniac, the guy who's been living with me since the 30 last years and supporting me, il me supporte. And we don't have the same insomnia, which is terrible, because the worst thing you can do to an insomniac is, of course, wake him or her up. It's a cause of divorce, you know? So, of course, we don't sleep in the same bed and in the same bedroom. We sleep on the other side of the apartment, you know, not to wake him up or not to wake me up. So it's a system. It's very strange in France. It's kind of taboo. It's a sort of chic taboo. When married people don't sleep in the same bedroom, like, oh, well, les pauvres. But, well, it's the only way we found not to divorce, so it's...
You quote Michel Perrault about anthropological importance of that space. Tell us more.
Oh, the book quotes a lot of anthropologists, and Michel Perrault is a wonderful writer and a historian of the bedroom and of what bedrooms do to women and to men. And I couldn't speak about her as a specialist. She's just, I think she's almost 100 years old now, Michel Perrault. Yeah, and she's a wonderful woman. She's like our mother of all in France, the feminists and everybody else anyway. But no, I quote, it's a book that I wrote at night, meaning it's also a book that led me to read a lot of books at night. Because the good news is that when you're an insomniac, the best way to survive your insomnia is to read. It's obvious. You know, don't go on Instagram, don't even watch videos, or it's... Read paper books, because it's soothing, and apparently reading moves the same meditative areas in the brain than daydreaming, you know? And daydreaming does us a lot of good. Daydreaming is absolutely important for the health of our spirit and brain, and for the writing. If you want to write, take time to daydream. I have a phone, I am on Instagram, I'm addicted to, of course, but I try to keep, when I walk now, peacefully in the streets, I'm not on my phone. I try to daydream and just watch, you know. And ideas come to you, like boys came to me before. But no, but leave the girls alone. Leave the girls alone. Let them be. Mm.
And for the insomniacs in the audience, Marie really has tried everything, and I mean everything, to cure this. So buy the book. Not just for the brilliant, brilliant literature, but it's full of the things that she tried. Let's talk about Leave the Girls Alone. Let's talk about, you're both from France, so I want to take this opportunity to look at, you mentioned earlier, the pushback in the 90s against French feminism. I was raised with the idea that French women were feminists, all the way from Olympe de Gouges through de Beauvoir. I studied Hélène Sixou at university. And then most recently in history, and this went around the world, is the case of Gisèle Pellicot, which the impact has been so shocking that it's comparable to the Delhi bus rape, the Nirbhaya case in 2012. For anyone that hasn't heard of it, it was a case of a husband drugging his wife and inviting quantities of men to rape her. Where are we at with French feminism? The case of Gisèle herself has become an extraordinary icon, but what does this tell us about where feminism is today, given that you've both written about the themes of violence towards women?
In my case, it's pretty strange because I lived for 20 years in Mexico. So my relationship to feminism is more Latin American feminism.
Ni una más.
Ni una más and the green wave of since 2017. It started from Argentina and it spread out in all Latin America. The Me Too movement in Latin America, and it's the way I related to feminism is in a very specific surrounding, and I think it's interesting because even the word feminist can be intimidating. So the way I came to collective movements of women talking about a common experience of being subject to violence has been into circles where we don't even mention the word feminism. We are just women who try to fight that violence. And I think it's interesting to mention because sometimes we don't even realize that some structures that are supposed to free ourselves can be intimidating and exclude other people. So I think it's been interesting, just to talk about women who try to find a better place for themselves, instead of talking about feminism, which has sometimes this theoretical...
So you think the terminology is problematic in that it excludes...
It's not necessarily problematic, but it was interesting for me to come to feminism not knowing it was feminism. Just getting together with other women, trying to find collective ways of building up our freedom.
About Gisèle Pellicot, we in France, most of the country admires her, actually. There's also the daughter, Caroline Darrieussecq, who has probably also been raped by Monsieur Pellicot.
I should clarify for the audience that Gisèle Pellicot refused the right. She had the right to anonymity, and she said, "No, I will appear as myself in court and not be anonymous," which is such
of course,
so
it's good to. Yes, she's one among us who says shame must change sides. We don't have to be ashamed of sexual violence. We have to educate the boys to stop molesting girls. We don't have to educate the girls to avoid what? Streets? Dancings? No, in my village, I was raised in a small village. There was a rape case during a party at midnight, and she was 14. And the mayor of the village accused the girl, not the boys. And that was only a few years ago, like 5 years ago, in my village in France. So we still have such a long way, We have to educate the boys to stop sexual violence against women. I love men. I even wrote a book about that, a book that is called We Have to Love Men a Lot. It's possible. We will come to you if you are nice, okay? Stop molesting us.
But it's an important point to make, it's not about hating men.
No.
It's not about building a separation between men and women. Destroying patriarchy, changing the way we relate to each other is beneficial for all of us.
Absolutely. So I hope that we've given you a sense of both the extraordinary intimacy and courage of your work, and as well of the universal themes. So it comes now to you, the audience. I want to see lots of hands flying up. Where are the microphones? Are you ready? Come quickly. Speed is of the essence. So please can you raise your hands now if you have a question. Normally I say I'd like a question from a woman. That's my usual opening, but I'm quite interested to see what the men have got to say about this, but let's, at this point we'll take a question from anyone. Who had their hand up? Yes, please.
Thank you so much for this topic because it's so much important to discuss about this, the child sexual abuse. I wanted to ask you, ma'am, what was your writing process? Because sometimes if you're writing about your personal trauma, one has to be either from a third person or from the first person narrative, whether to put it in a fragmented form or just a linear pattern. What was it like for you? And for one target audience, let's just say that if we want to introduce something like that to children, because I'm a teacher myself, how can I talk about that in a very simple manner that is not traumatizing for them? And those who have felt this abuse are not, again, reminded of their trauma. And the future kids are not feared about that. Thank you.
Are you clear
Thank you.
about the question?
I'm not sure I understood the second part.
So the first was about your writing process,
Yes.
about writing trauma, and the second was about helpful ways to talk about this subject to young people.
How
Is that
can we
fair?
introduce something about child sexual abuse to children? How can we introduce that
Yes.
in a not so traumatic way?
It's a very interesting and tricky topic because if the whole society nurtures the taboo and silences and doesn't allow the possibility of this conversation, it's very complicated. But in my case, and I tell that story in the book also, I talked to my daughter from a very young age, and I was scared to bring the subject because we always think that bringing that subject could be traumatic, which is a mistake. What is traumatic is sexual violence. Words are not going to create trauma, especially if those words create a safe context to open up and share thoughts with a child. And it was a very interesting experience because most children and all children, they are fearless if you open up this possibility. And what happened with my daughter is that she just asked me simple questions. I told her I was abused as a child. Do you know what abuse means? And she's like, no. Well, it's when an adult forces you to have a relationship with their private parts. And then I had to explain. And she had questions, but like very simple questions, because she needs to know. And so if you open up this possibility, you'll see it's less difficult than you think it is. And it was the same thing with me. I thought it was a mountain. There was no way of talking about this subject. But it's the same thing in society. Like, we don't talk about child abuse, even if we know that it happens in so many families, in almost every family. Why don't we talk about this? Why don't we try? It's less difficult than we think it is. But it's hard to find an excuse. How am I going to bring that topic? It's also, again, the question of shame, the question of being the one ruining the party. So to answer your other question about my writing process, I think it took me 30 years to find the narrative voice, to find the form that was that had the good dynamics for me. And it was very hard because I think I would prefer to tell that story from another point of view, but I have no choice because it happened to me. So it was an interesting process that I finally had to make the decision to do this, even if I don't want to. And I think it's something that my readers thank me for, like for opening that possibility for myself. It opens the possibility for them too.
You can also try to write children books. And for example, my very first children book, I published it more than 20 years ago. And it's about a prince and a princess and a prince that do not get married in the end because they don't want to and they are too young and probably the guy is gay. So there are many good reasons not to get married. And this book had a big success in France, and it's very often adapted for theater, for kids. And so you can always find a way to tell the kids to think by themselves, you know.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions from the audience? There's a very eager one here, and then this yellow hand. Keep your hand up. And please, second microphone person, can you come here so that you're ready? Thank you.
So we started the conversations on the note of intimacy. Can you hear me? And you've spoken about how you practice intimacy in your writing, but it's still removed, memory and then translation. You've spoken about how you negotiate writing and being intimate, but you're also a translator who reads. And so as a reader, what are the ways you practice in making reading more intimate? Like, I often feel removed. I mean, even the most beautiful pieces, I'm waiting to read yours, but what are your practices as a reader that inculcate intimacy?
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll take the other question too from you.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Hi. So my question is, when you talked about, the girls being seen as the victims or being, blamed for being in a situation where they get some abuse or however. So in that sense, when you said that the boys need to be better, but that has to come from the families. It has to come from the parents, right? In a society like ours, the parents are more often not willing to hear the girl's story, right? And so in that situation, how does one make themselves be heard, be seen, and just how to change that, bring that shift about in the sense that the girl's story also matters, and the fact that what she has gone through needs to be heard and needs to be brought out there, and how your story has come about. So yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
So one is about reading practice and how to recover the intimacy therein, and the other is about the problem of families not supporting victims of abuse and taking it seriously, and how to, what are the, am I right in paraphrasing, what are the other ways that the situation could be addressed? Thank you.
It's a very interesting question, and there's probably no just one answer. Like, we have to look for ways to question the silence in the families. We have to start questioning the way we see family as a sacred thing, and how it destroys us, and how it silences voices. And I have no specific answer to this, but I think it's interesting and it's very important we start to question this. Thank you so much for that question.
I found strength in leaving my village, actually, and getting an education, thanks to my parents, but I also had to leave, especially my father. And when I started publishing, I was scared of his reading, but I overcame it. And it's perhaps easier to say than to do. It took me years, but yeah, I don't know, je ne peux pas, I can't speak for India anyway, but I had to leave my village for sure.
And the intimacy of reading?
Well, in a way I answer, because the reader I feared most was my father. And but now I'm not very at ease with my children reading me. So you're always cornered as a writer, That's why I also need to imagine readers like a friendly friends, in fact, but also abstract friends. I'm not sure I answer your question. Do you want to answer?
I think it was a question about our practices of reading, what we read and how we read. And I think we also share this, like, we read all the time.
Yes.
And it's like, very, I would say some very basic stuff that it gave me several lives instead of just having one. And I think we all share this, like the enthusiasm and the freedom it gives us to be able to go to so many places through reading.
It's a wonderful way of describing it, that reading a book can give you several lives, and who doesn't want that? So I would urge you, as our closing, in our closing words, to buy these extraordinary books, because they will truly change the way you feel about the subject matter. They're both deeply immersive and amazing reading experiences. Please join me in thanking Marie and Neige.